Well, one of the most important things I think to understand about auditing, in terms of what it does, is it increases your freedom of choice. And LRH said something very interesting one time. He said that all freedom is freedom of choice. And the only thing you're ever really doing with auditing is you're rehabilitating the person's own freedom of choice. And the main thing that bank does is it curtails or inhibits your ability to decide. Because like the minute you have to be something or can't be something or have to do something or can't do something or have to have something or can't have something, then you no longer have freedom of choice about that thing. And so it also limits your ability to play games because, well, any game has freedoms, barriers, and purposes, right? So that's common to every game. So in order to choose what games you want to play, you also have to be able to choose what freedoms that you want and what barriers that you want. So you have freedom of choice about barriers and freedom of choice about freedoms. And I think one of the things that happens to a person on their time track is they agree to a game to play, which means that they have agreed to a limitation of their freedom of choice because they've agreed to a barrier of some kind, or they've agreed to a freedom, or they agreed to not have a freedom, or to not have a barrier, or they've made some choice about that. And to the degree that that game is still in play in their universe, then it kind of rolls up into PT, and that by itself limits the ability of the person to play a game of their own choosing, or even really to become aware of what games they're actually playing. Because Allred says, you're always playing games that you know you're playing, but then you're also playing games you don't know you're playing. You know what identity you're being, but there's identities you're being that you really are not fully aware of, and so identities plays into this as well, because if you're being a particular identity, that identity being a beingness has a doingness and havingness connected with it. So once you choose an identity, you're locked into a doingness and havingness concerning that identity, and that limits your freedom of choice, certainly on the level of beingness, and then derived from that on the level of doingness and havingness. And so again, if you're at the top of some of the scales in Scientology is identityless, no need or requirement to have an identity, but an ability to have an identity or to be certain things or not be certain things. So that's where your freedom of choice starts there, just with the idea of being able to choose, who you are and what you are and what you want to do and what you want to have. Because all these identities are parts of past games. So if you're playing a past game that you're not completely aware of, you're also playing a role in that game, which is an identity. So, and that whole subject is really what you're dealing with, the basic things you're dealing with auditing, particularly the L's. The L's deal with this in a very, very basic way, because so much of this is really outside the person's normal awareness. The real trick with the L's and what LRH, the brilliance of the tech, was that he got people to audit things that they weren't really normally aware of, things that were above their awareness level. So, it's quite an achievement. So, do you have any questions about any of that?
Well, no, I don't have questions about else or identities or particular piece of technology. But I just really liked your lectures, and there would be always something that I can learn and then use in my life and see a little bit better. Like, for example, your lecture on the 2D how to have a say in second dynamic was very helpful. And there was a lot I learned from the last convention, how to deal with your body, you know.
Well, thank you. One of the things that happens when you, what we're talking about auditing here is your GPM bank, which is the tendency. It's a basic case phenomena of adopting identities and then having opposing identities. I gave a whole talk about it.
Yeah.
But it really ties into this idea of freedom of choice, because one of the things you notice after you've done the L's is the little things that are, it's very hard to see it's very hard to see the GPM. All you can really see are its footprints. You know, it leaves these little footprints in your life. So you can say, you can find out, well, what does somebody hate? You know, what are they drawn to? You know, what do they have to do? What can't they do? Those are little bits and pieces of the big picture, which, you know, is really the only way to get to the big picture. Is you have to pull the string on all these little things. What are they fighting against? What gives them trouble? You know, what are they trying to accomplish? What's the ideal scene? And that gets mixed up with old games, and so it just, people get quite confused. And then one of the things that people dislike the most, really, when they're uptone particularly, is getting sucked into games they don't really want to play, which is, again, power of choice. But LRH defines games condition as games you're playing outside of your power of choice. So, when somebody presses a button, which is just, which stimulates a GPM or a game, the button gets pushed, and that turns on automatic behavior. Now, of course, this is true of an engram as well. An engram, computer stimulated, and turns on automatic behavior. But the GPMs are more basic because they're whole, whole packages of behavior. So somebody comes along and says something to you, and then you're in an argument or something, and then you go, why am I arguing with this guy? So it's sort of, when you don't have these kind of buttons that are hot in your universe, then you have much more of an ability to stay exterior to life and livingness. And again, you have a power of choice of what to get involved with and what not to get involved with, because there's a lot of games that people are playing you really don't want to get involved with, but you find yourself embroiled or something. But you see this on the internet all the time. Anyway, it's a very it's such a wonderful tech, and people are normally thinking about in terms of dramatic OT abilities or dramatic exteriorizations or these kind of things, and that's why people say, oh, that's why I want to do my OT, that's why I want to do my tech. But the wonderful feeling that you have just in day-to-day living, the ability to just be normal and not to be beset by conflicts, thoughts, compulsions, and inhibitions, just to do the things you want to do and to have the things you want to have, and have the kind of relationships you want to have and the kind of products that you want to have. I mean,
that's not normal.
It's not normal.
That's extraordinary.
It is, but when you're in that zone, it feels very normal, and it is just gold. These are the kinds of wins that you will get as a result of handling this type of case. And so that's what I always tell people. Great if you go exterior full perception and sail across the Atlantic Ocean and crash into the waves. Good for you. It sounds like fun. But just to have a nice smile on your face and be warm and friendly to people and happy to be what you're doing and where you are and who you know. I mean, that's really the big benefit.